So nice to see you, Bill. Thank you for doing this. Now, I clearly know you very well, and I have probably missold you.
Oh.
So I have positioned you as a breathwork expert, that you have been on the stage with Jack Canfield to big audiences, shared stages with him, that you have run Firewalks on Survivor program, that you've been a firewalking instructor for 30 years, that you're NLP trained, that you are an acupuncturist and a Chinese medicine practitioner or doctor. That's how I positioned it. So clean that up for me, and you do your own introduction.
Yeah, I think that was pretty good. I probably should have you do my resume. Yeah, I've been doing breathwork probably almost 25 years now, just over 20 years for sure. I studied Ericksonian hypnotherapy in 1991 is when I started doing that. It was at the height of the AIDS crisis, and I implemented what I learned as a hypnotherapist into hospice care. And that's where that kind of set my journey onto exploring just rituals and ceremony and the whole lot. And that's when I was introduced into the sort of Sundor family with Peggy Dillon and the breath work, the firewalking, sweat lodges, the real, I think that the magic of ritual healing, I guess you could say. I have to be careful sometimes. I don't always like to sound too crazy and woo-woo, but wow. You know, there's something happening in all of this. And what I really appreciate now is in a lot of the research I'm doing, there's clinical studies, even on breath work, on what it does to the brain and what it does to trauma in the body. So that's really fascinating that, you know, there's studies being done on the work we've all been doing for decades now.
So there'll be some people that know what breath work is, and then there'll be some people thinking, why are we making breathing work? So for the people that have absolutely no idea what on earth we're talking about, can you share what breath work is?
Sure, I can share what it is in the way I present it and do it, and I'm certain that there will be people out there who watch this and see this and go, well, I do something very different, and now he does something I don't know what he's talking about, and that's fine. The work around breath and utilizing breath in a way to create an altered state of awareness is what I work with and work in the breath. There's two types of breath that I work with. I was trained and taught a little differently, and then over the years, I kind of developed my own little experience with the breath work. And in the studies that I have found, the one that I learned from is the trauma breath and doing sort of trauma rescue, if you will, through breath work. And that's that big upper chest breath. Chest breath, right? The other breath that I utilize also in the practice is the belly breath. So when you inhale, you take a big long breath and your belly expands. That's the breath you'd likely would be doing sort of in just simple meditation. I get people that come in and say, oh, I have difficulty breathing. I'm not a belly breather, blah, blah, blah. And I have to remind them that, you know, in your natural state of rest and relaxation, you're a belly breather. When you sleep, you're a belly breather. So belly breathing is absolutely natural and normal. But the two different types of the breath, the upper chest breath, that trauma breath, it interacts with the sympathetic nervous system. It releases cortisol and adrenaline into the body. So back in the day, when saber-toothed tiger came trotting through the village, what happened to the body? The cortisol, when it's released into the body, it releases sugar stored in fat, carbohydrates in the body. That sugar gives the muscles of the body strength and power. And it gives clarity. The sugar gives clarity to the brain. The brain loves sugar. The body loves sugar. We need sugar, right? And so that's that part of in trauma, sometimes in maybe like an accident, a fall, or a car accident of some sort, where the experience suddenly moves in slow motion, right? That's the body trigger in that trauma of that awareness piece that comes in. That's that sort of ancestral experience that we used to utilize a lot differently and better, I think, perhaps than our typical day where we're caught up in this other state of distractions. So anyway, saber-toothed tiger comes trotting to the village, happens, adrenaline, cortisol. I'm either going to fight that saber-toothed tiger off or run and hide. Today, saber-toothed tigers come in the form of many different forms. They come in, jobs being ended, relocated across the country, relationships ended, personal trauma happening into the body, assault, abuse, whatever it might be. So there's different kinds of trauma that happen. Your teenage kid getting called by the principal, whatever it might be, right? And in that moment happens, right? So the text message comes up, the phone rings, whatever it might be. And the way we react to trauma now is we respond to the text message, the email, the phone call, or we drive in our car. But we don't run or fight that saber-toothed tiger, right? That trauma, that stress experience. And so what happens is that when we do that, the cortisol loop begins, right? So let's say I'm at a job that's already stressful and difficult. I have normal cortisol being released in my day. I sit at a computer a little hunched over. I don't get a full diaphoretic breath in my sitting posture, right? That upper chest breath, just in that sitting posture, leaning forward posture, that creates a little bit of a cortisol leak into the body, creating stress, or rather releasing or into the sugar of the body. Now, what happens is that if we don't utilize that sugar, we don't fight or flight, whatever it might be, the body will not release that sugar into the body or out of the body. It will store it. It must store it. It will not release it through urination, defecation, sweat, or whatnot, right? Vomit. It will hold that sugar and will specifically store that sugar released by cortisol around the belly, the waistline of the body.
Right.
So as we live in that perpetual sort of state of trauma, stress in our body, we're in that loop, that cortisol dump puts the weight on in our gut and our belly, then our hormones start to come out of balance. So there's a point to all of this that I'm getting there, right? So the body becomes out of balance hormonally. I believe in better living through chemistry, right? So what I eat matters to my body and my being. It induces a chemical reaction in my body. The emotions, events that happen to my life, some of them that are out of my control, but my emotional state and well-being is in my control, and I do the best to try to govern that and be aware of what can I change and what can I am powerless over. Essentially, that's serenity prayer. So once I start to recognize, okay, I've got this little trauma, this thing going on here. The way to activate and release and change that through breath work is perhaps we do a breathwork exercise to release that trauma and use the trauma breath to create an altered experience in the body. The body will begin to sort of buzz, vibrate. The lightheaded and dizziness turns into lucid, dreamy experience. And we can do a process of that trauma to break that trauma loop or that stress loop. Then in the same breathwork session, I introduce the belly breath as well now. The belly breath is connected to the parasympathetic nervous system of the body. Rest, relax, life is good, right? So the belly breath will release serotonin and dopamine into the body. The serotonin is released through the gut, and when the brain releases serotonin, we call it dopamine. And that will go traveling through the body as well. So if I'm living in a state of stress, depression, sadness, I fall into that slump of after a while or a time of being depressed, I might go. So the serotonin and the dopamine. Jumping ahead a little bit, the serotonin and the dopamine. The serotonin looks to go and attach to the receptor cells of the body to be utilized. Okay. So what happens if I'm in the state of sadness or depression, and I'm not releasing serotonin into my body, even through laughs and giggles and love and affection and kindness, either outward or inward, the body will do what's called down-regulating. It will take away the receptor cells of the body to receive the serotonin. This was something that was hypothesized by Dr. Candace Pert in this, I think it was the 1970s. And in the land of the scientific community, she was deemed a quack and, absolutely out of her mind. She doesn't know what she's talking about. As technology developed, lo and behold, she was absolutely spot on. And the body has these receptor cells. The hormones, the serotonin wants to connect into them to give us that euphoric feeling in our body and in our being. So when I'm not in that state of happiness, my body will downregulate. And perhaps if I'm in that longer state of depression or sadness, I might go see a doctor, and the doctor might prescribe a SSRI, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, right? So if someone's on those right now, you need to consult with your doctor. You never want to just stop taking those. You got to wean yourself off of those. But we can train our bodies, and there's clinical studies that show that through it works really well at the end of your day, kind of after that 3:30, 4 o'clock experience, where you do 30 minutes of vigorous exercise, big walk around the block, jump rope, do sit-ups, push-ups, go dance, whatever it might be. Breath work is another good one. Intentional yoga is another good one, where I begin to start releasing the serotonin into my body. The body will then go, oh, look, serotonin's coming in. And it will do what's called upregulating and create those receptor cells into the body. So, long story, even longer, the idea here is that when I have found myself in a bit of that slump or in a bit of living in this loop of trauma, breath work can be a catalyst to break that chain and reorganize even the brain patterning of the body. And that's what we're seeing in clinical studies. There was one clinical study that was just done this year, February 2018, where they looked at I think it was 14 case studies, clinical random clinical trials of patients who suffered from PTSD. The patients underwent breath work and mantras training. And through a period of time, I think it was like 4 or 6 weeks, they were able to not only come out of their experience of PTSD, their symptoms were improved, but it was due to the breath work particularly and the training of mantras, which I can talk about later, that they had an 80% hold on their abilities to be out of this PTSD trauma experience.
Mm-hmm.
That was a long story. Sorry.
Well, it's very impactful. It's very, and what's really clear, listening to the way you tell it, is you are an avid believer. Of course, you wouldn't, knowing you wouldn't do something you didn't wholeheartedly believe in, but you've clearly studied the body's physical responses as well as emotional responses, and even, dare I say it, spiritual. And they're not separate, are they? Each of the way that the body responds are not separate. So our emotional responses and experiences are in our cells, aren't they? So the breath work is what helps change the memory, the cellular memory. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what you're referring to is what we're still trying to wrap ourselves, our awareness and understanding around the connective tissue of the body, the fascia. The muscles of the body are covered with this white connective tissue. It's what comes into the covers the muscle belly and attaches to the bones of the body so that we can move our body. That connective tissue, it's believed that that is still a dynamic, emotional component of our body, and that it is indeed a part of our brain connected awareness. So the science isn't yet caught up to how and what this is all about. But when we do breath work, it's difficult to describe the sensation and the experience, and I know that you've experienced it through breath work. You're doing breath work, but your body vibrates. And my understanding and belief in this is that that's the connective tissue resonating and vibrating. And during breath work, often there's a big emotional release that can happen. I try not to get too much into details and promises of what may or may not happen in a breathwork session because it's very different for everybody.
Yeah, it's unique to each person's experience and what they want to get out of it and what they're prepared to push through or move through, either consciously or unconsciously, isn't it? And so, when did you train? So, when and where did you train in this? And I'm a massive believer in our training actually really takes place when you start working with people. So that's I believe that one completely. Yeah. So I set out to study breath work with Peggy Dillon of Sundor. She had worked very closely with Leonard Orr in the 1960s and early 70s. Leonard Orr was, I should say, is probably the creator of the rebirthing breathwork movement, right? I don't think we really we don't utilize that title, rebirthing, anymore. It has this sort of odd stigma for some people. But we just say breathwork now. And people who have trained and worked with him have gone in their own different directions and called it different things, holotropic breathwork and so on. And it's all a derivative of the same kind of breathwork experience. I don't really care what people call it. Bravo for them for wanting to sort of make their name and their mark, but it's breathwork. So I learned from Peggy Dillon, and in that time, I did not step into this thinking, oh, I'm going to be a breathwork practitioner. I'm going to do breathwork. No, I did it for my own personal exploration and experience. And I didn't start doing private breathwork sessions probably until maybe 5 years after I studied and completed my own experience. And then I started in my workshops and seminars that I was doing. I started to do more small group workshops and seminars and implemented more breath work in there. And now I do private one-on-one sessions in my clinic and at a healing center in the desert here. Palm Springs.
Palm Springs.
I've got lots of questions. So how long ago was it that you did your training with Peggy?
So probably in 1996, 97, somewhere there.
So over 20 years ago,
yeah,
you've been doing it with people for over 15 years. And so I don't know how able you are to give an example of the kind of transformations or breakthroughs that you've helped people move through over the time. I know everything's confidential, but I don't know if you could just give a flavour to people of why somebody would come to you and what, in your experience, people have experienced.
Yeah. So often I get people coming in sometimes who say, I don't know why I'm here, but I've been told that I should come and do breath work with you. So we start there. And so what I do is I say, okay, well, what I like to set up here is what is the intention of this breathwork session? And in that intention, what I'm looking for is what is it that you would like to release that no longer serves you, whether it's regret, remorse, upset, whatever it might be. And or you can ask for and pull in a sort of self-empowerment of what will help you move through dynamically into your next big experience, whatever it might be. And so in that, they'll start to talk about a little bit of their life history. I just let people talk. And I'm through NLP, I'm really picking up and listening to what they're really saying. People are always have something else that they're saying underneath their story. Many people like to talk about how everything's, great, wonderful, and I have this and I have that, and I will start to ask questions. Oh, what's that like for you? That sounds like a lot that's going on. And I start to sort of break it down into what's happening in their life. Are they overwhelmed, underwhelmed, whatever it might be? And then in that, they'll start to talk about what's there to be released. Then I'll start to say, ask questions of when was the first time you remember that kind of happening in your life? For example, someone might say, well, I always feel like I'm being, my voice is being quieted or shut down, or I'm not being taken seriously. So I might ask, when was the first time you can remember not being taken seriously? Or when was the first time in your life that you were quieted or hushed? And often it's an early childhood experience. I was, my parents were very strict and I had to, be quiet at all times or whatever it might be. Okay, so in the breath work, what we're going to do, and I utilize, this is where I've kind of created this sort of new, unique experience in my breathwork experience. I'll induce the breath work, and then I'll take them in through a journey of many different kinds of modalities at my fingertips to go and do sort of what we refer to as a power retrieval, and go get that hushed child and bring that voice back, or bring the play back into their life, whatever it might be. Or we might do a future pacing, could go to a future memory and bring back the interest and answers of the future memory of how did I get to that place that I want to get to in my life. So utilize techniques of that nature. And that comes from my hypnotic NLP, Ericksonian hypnotherapy that I've been doing since 1991. So yeah, that's how I kind of operate it.
Do you think that breathwork works? One of the reasons why it works is because it bypasses the logical, analytical, conscious mind that just gets in the way, and then you get right into the being, the unconscious being.
Yeah, that's the part of why I have this love affair with utilizing breath work, because we can sit in a therapy session and talk about X, Y, and Z. We can do hypnosis and do some brain patterning experience, blah, 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 blah. But the breath work puts you into a dynamic, altered state. Mm-hmm. And that's when essentially you get out of your own way. Yeah. And that's when, and this is another part of where, the brain is a plastic. It's able to be remodeled and remolded. And so if I'm living in this memory trauma of something that's dynamic and painful, and every day I'm reminded of it, or something on my, whatever it could be, family, friends, bad relationship, whatever it is, every time I'm in that experience and I'm being reminded of how, terrible or difficult or whatever this is, I connect into the cluster of brain cells in that memory, and I fortify them every time I think about it. And I send sugar into that space to give those brain cells, that cluster of brain cells, health and nourishment. And in that thinking of that particular idea, I send blood vessels to help fortify that cluster of thought. And in the breath work, we can do kind of like a pattern interruption. And we can say, okay, now I'm a little altered. And I take you through this experience. Okay, now let's look at the flip side. What's the good? What's the positive? Let's release this shame that I had. And I might do an exercise where we take the shame and we project it out of the body. We give it shape, we give it form, we give it texture. We allow it to transform itself into a creature. And we then address that shame and say, thank you for being here. I really appreciate everything you did, from whatever it was, from making me humble or holding me back in my life. Thank you so much for what you did for me. But your work here is no longer needed. And it's time for you to go. And we let it go on its way. Then in that moment of letting it go on the way, now we bring an awareness into the mind of what was the lesson in that having and holding that shame that's now going to propel us into the future. So it's similar to we talk about in some of this work about the Japanese pottery. Of the pottery is broken, they put it back together and it's sealed with the gold. They seal the cracks with gold, right? Everyone seems to know all about this pottery now, yeah. And so in that, we're taking that trauma, that experience, and we're filling that crack with gold, and that gold that we're healing it with is a new awareness in the mind to say, and here's how we become powerful now. Here's the strength we're moving forward with now. Mm-hmm. We repattern the mind as well. Mm-hmm. And this is also something that we can look at in clinical studies and trials that say, absolutely, we can change the way we think about the world around us, ourselves, the whole thing. It's the brain is incredible.
Well, it's quite well known that the brain does not distinguish between visualization and reality. It thinks that once it's visualized it, it's experienced it, so therefore it's inevitable. But it feels to me like your style of breath work that probably is not on the shelf for people to buy anywhere else, because it's a combination of your passion for the mind and for the body and for the soul, all of the bits that you've made your own recipe with it. So it's, it feels to me like it's incredibly empowering. And the whole time, from what I'm hearing with what you're saying, is the whole time the recipient is navigating and controlling their experience of the breath work. You're listening to their messages and using that for them and with them, which is massive, massive. Can you share probably the most profound transformation somebody has had as a result of breath work? Are you allowed to?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of pick a one story, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know if I can really pick a particular story.
But a theme, then. Perhaps a theme.
Yeah, I can go with a theme. The theme would be many people carry anger in their body and being. They're angry at their parents, their childhood, their family, their experience or whatnot. And this doesn't happen. I don't often use this one. This is like one I have sort of like in my back pocket kind of experience that I'm happy to share. Is that because a lot of times I'll be, I shouldn't be angry. I should be a nicer person. I should be whatever. But they make me so glad. So what I like to do is I like to teach people about how to utilize anger in a positive way. And one of them is I teach people about the angry Buddha. Fudo is the angry Buddha, Fudo Mio. And Fudo is this crazy looking Buddha. He comes out of Japan and he's got a sword in one hand and a rope in another. And he's got these cocked eyes, crazy, and these fangs. And he's just a mean looking person, right? And so we utilize the angry Buddha to cut through, to use that sword like a juggernaut to cut through the fat of what's happening here. And the idea is that the Fudo will use that sword to actually dismember and cut the heads off of the demons that are distracting him from his place of enlightenment. And he uses the rope to hogtie demons, right? Those mad thoughts, right? Those negative emotions. We dismember those negative emotions. We hogtie those evil thoughts, and we let them be sort of put at bay, so that we can continue on that path of emotional freedom. And so this is a technique that I might teach somebody who's struggling with an angry divorce or an angry abusive relationship. And it takes away the heat out of the experience, the emotional heat, so that there's clarity of thought.
The personalities.
Yeah, it takes that emotional heat, that emotional personality out of it, so that I can start to have a clarity of an understanding of like the end result I'm looking for is not only my own personal happiness, but the liberation and freedom of happiness for everybody. And when I can hogtie those emotions and madness and activity that's put it away, I move forward. And so that might be another kind of modality I might use, even in the breathwork induction experience of like, our intention is to kind of pull the internal Fudo within you and bring that Buddha to light.
And so therefore, if somebody's harnessed their inner anger, their tension, their stress, I'm guessing the transformation then is going to be that life is in flow and what is intended for them is kind of magnetic towards them on their path. So this anger is almost creating blocks in their relationships, in their abundance, in their business. And they might already be successful people, I'm guessing.
I work with dynamically successful people.
Yeah, because if people are going to do this work on themselves, they have an awareness that's quite magical, really. And I have this self-responsibility to think there's something not working quite right. I'm going to do something about it. So it's usually very successful, dynamic, self-aware, self-responsible people. So I'm guessing that they could be very successful, but for them it's probably taken a lot of push energy in spite of they have fought their way to be where they are. And then once they've done the breath work, is it true then that they have this sense of ease and even more success, even more abundance, more joyful relationships, more ease and peace is their experience of life?
Yeah, often and regularly I'll get notes and letters back from people about, being able to shed dynamic grief even. I had a woman come to me, she lost her husband and then both of her sons within a year of each other passed away. So she was carrying dynamic grief, sadness. But it wasn't just something that happened 6 months ago. She had been carrying this sadness for a decade. And you could see her sadness. You could see she was sad. And we did the breath work and we were able to, I think what we got to in this idea of why she was holding on to the grief was that if she thought that if she would release that grief and sadness, she would forget them.
Yeah.
And so when we change this concept of you're not going to forget, but now you're going to be able to celebrate not only your own life, but the lives of these other, people that were with you for this time and celebrate, the gifts that they gave you. And that was a big transformational experience through breathwork.
So one of the things that you said earlier that I'm sure many people will identify with straight away when you said it was that holding weight at the front because the sugar has not been released or can't be released from the body, so the body holds it. So is there something that somebody could do themselves just very gently, not expecting a massive dynamic outcome as if they would if they were with you, but what exercise could somebody do for themselves that just helps them have a little bit more control? Is there a breathwork?
Yeah, so there's certainly anyone can really do breath work easily on their own. Absolutely. I like to kind of give a little kind of be aware that when you're doing breath work of this nature, when we're doing the big diaphoretic breath and you've never done it before, that there can be emotions that can come up. So I caution people to say, look, if you're gonna do this and you're gonna do it by yourself, you set a little time limit and you only do it for 7 minutes.
Right.
7 minutes is all you need to kind of start to feel that altered experience, right? without getting overly altered and out of control, perhaps even in an emotion. But 7 minutes to oxygenate the brain, the body. And then you set a 3-word mantra for yourself. Now, here's an interesting thing that clinical studies have found. Mantras help to reshape the brain as well. And so I think it was over a 6 or 8 week trial of doing mantras. And this was also a study that was done with PTSD, but it was also done with anger management, focus and attention as well. The mantra can be ancient Sanskrit, it can be Om Ha Hung, it could be whatever your favorite mantra is. You can even create and make your own mantra. 3 words. My life is good, right? I step into health, whatever it might be, right? Joy surrounds me, or joy surrounds, that's 3 words, right? Joy surrounds, whatever it might be. It can be anything, right? So you'll do the breath work for 7 minutes, a nice belly breath. Right? Siri, set a timer for 7 minutes, right? And then at the end of the timer, or you set an alarm for 7 minutes, whatever, to play some music to bring you out of the experience, right? To stop the heavy big breath, just go into gentle breaths, let your body be relaxed. You're doing this laying on the floor, by the way, or in your bed. You can even allow yourself to drift off into sleep if you wanted to. But after, when that alarm goes off, after that 7 minutes, then you begin your mantra. And you just do your mantra till the buzzing of your body dissipates, or you feel done, as it were. Or you fall asleep and take a nice nap.
That's fabulous. And so knowing people as I do, there will be, how we're so busy with devices and having to do things at the same time. So one of the questions I know people will ask is, what do I think whilst I'm breathing?
So what I do...
Not just breathing, that's not enough.
Actually, no, that is just plenty. Yeah. You can play some nice music as well in that. So if you have the capabilities to have one piece of music playing, and then after the 7 minutes, it changes. You can put a song that, plays. Just typical songs are 3 to 4 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to put it on repeat 3 times, 2 times, whatever it might be. And then the next song will play. So that's fine.
Just on that, knowing that, music's anchors, and is there music that you would tell people to avoid doing whilst they're doing the breath work in case it anchors them in the future? Yeah.
You should avoid any music that you can sing along to that you know too well.
Or that you drive to.
Yeah, or you drive to. Yeah, it should be music that is different than you listen to in your everyday, perhaps. That being said, it certainly can be just, general devotional music of repeated mantra music is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful to work with. So you can play that over. You can play the Gayatri mantra over and over. That's usually a long musical piece. You play that twice through, and then have a different piece of music come on. Now, the different piece of music should not have a mantra. It should just be free, floaty, little,
tune.
Yes, kind of. I hate to say the word spa music, but floaty, happy music. Because that's when you're doing your mantra, all right? So you don't want a mantra going on while you're doing your mantra, all right? You want your mantra to be focused in the forefront. So that works very well.
That's an amazing exercise. So just 7 minutes, an alarm clock, some music that they don't normally listen to. Big breaths in through the mouth, out through the mouth, in through the mouth. Is that right? In and out through the mouth?
Yeah, in and out of the mouth. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, absolutely. In and out of the mouth. Get a bigger and better breath.
After 7, and just thinking about breathing, which is also meditation. It's very powerful for the frontal cortex. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Lights it all up.
And after 7 minutes, they then put on a different kind of music and do their 3-word mantra. Now, you mentioned Om Ha Hong. Can you just explain what those 3 words mean?
So, as kind of taught to me, the Om Ha Hung, the Om is Om, peace, gentleness, ease, right? Ha, Om, ha, ha, Om, ha. Ha is the sound of that moving into the heart, and the Om is the radiant outward, whatever.
So in and out. Love.
In, out.
So people can use that, or I'm surrounded by love, or life supports me, or any of those, but keep it to 3. And then once the body has finished its work, it's fizzing, it's processing, then that's the end. So it could be 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times people say, "Oh, I'm such a busy person. I don't have spare 10 minutes in my day." Okay. So what I like to say to those people and really point out very clearly is, if you're starting a conversation of, "I don't have a spare 10 minutes in my day for myself," we have to have a bigger conversation about what's going on in your life. The other thing I like to point out very clearly, and there's no denying this one, is that people who smoke cigarettes will take a break almost every hour on the hour to go and smoke a cigarette. They'll interrupt a conversation, a meeting. They'll get up from the dinner table at a restaurant or even someone's home and go smoke a cigarette, right? So I'm talking about the lone wolf smoker, right? Not the chit-chat circle smoker, right? But the lone wolf smoker. They'll go out there, they'll light their incense, they'll do their breath work, right? Incense going, breath work's happening. They take bigger breaths when they smoke a cigarette, okay? A cigarette burns for 7 to 11 minutes. Now, what happens to a smoker after they come back from that little cigarette break? I'm ready, back in here, I'm focused, I'm ready, I'm great, I'm good, let's get to this. They just took 7 to 11 minutes, pretty much 9 minutes, let's say, time for themselves to burn incense, the tobacco, do breath work, and let their mind wander, right? So the Native Americans say that the tobacco is the herb of the heart. Smoking essentially the peace pipe, right? Smoking the ceremonial tobacco. The origins of it was to open up your heart, to speak in truth, to speak in love, to speak in friendship and compassion. And it's that essentially that we get addicted to that tobacco opening of the heart herb. And now all the other chemicals they put into them, but that's the other part. That's something else.
I love though that example. When I've worked with people who've smoked in the past, actually the smoking has served the purpose of exactly what you just said. Now, I think you've just given employees around the world, in fact, I'm just going to go out and have my breathwork session, the same as whoever.
So that's exactly what I tell people. I say, the other thing that research has shown is that people who do not smoke cigarettes in the workplace barely take a bathroom break. That was an interesting find, right? So I don't smoke cigarette, and I can attest to this being true for myself as a non-smoker. I'd go to work when I used to work in corporate, and I would just work the whole day. I'd work, and I'd take a lunch break, and there I am. I'd have my coffee at my desk even, and I'm working. And the people who are smoking are in and out of the office all day.
Moving, getting the blood going, moving the body. I mean, it has quite a lot of good for it.
So as a non-smoker, you're allowed to set a little timer and go out for 9 minutes. Go walk around the campus, go walk around the block, get outside for a quick moment. But yeah, absolutely.
So viewers, you've heard it. His name is Bill Bastian. I'll give you his number. Your boss can ring him directly. So now here's a question for people that don't have the good fortune of living in your vicinity. Here's a question for you. Is this possible to do if somebody wanted to have a consultation with you and to have a session with you, but just the logistics gets in the way? Is this possible to do on Skype, FaceTime, Messenger?
Yeah, not so much. We can do a verbal consultation over it, but to do breath work, it has to be in the physical presence.
So
I
was just going to say, could they not be doing the breath work here, you observing and then.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work so much because my experience is when people are having, and we don't know what's about to happen in the breath work, whether there's a big emotional release or I'm feeling a sensation let's say I've never done drugs or I've never had an altered experience in my life. Suddenly I do this breath work and I'm feeling very altered, very different. My body's buzzing, my vibrating, and I'm suddenly having an emotion. I didn't know I was having this emotion. You want someone there in person to coach you and move you through the experience.
It's a bit like me asking you, if you're the surgeon, is it all right if you just watch whilst they're doing my own operation?
Right. Well, today they have they do robotics, but nonetheless, it's a different thing. Yeah. You want to work with a breathwork practitioner in a one-on-one experience. You want the person there because you want that coaching in that moment. If I see even a glimmer of a complexion change, I can read what's happening in the body, perhaps in the mind, and what's going on. Maybe I might read the mind, but I can see that there's something going on, and I want to either encourage you to go deeper into that experience or separate out of that experience. So. Yeah,
it's not a remote experience. It has to be.
It's not a remote experience.
But I'm guessing that people can have conversations with you about
absolutely
where they're at, what they're experiencing. Okay, lovely. I really love this. I think what the insight that you've given into breathwork has been pretty mind blowing. That's without having the experience right now. So. But I think there's more we can talk about in the future. So we'll make sure we do that. Is there a note you want to lead the conversation on?
Keep breathing.
Fabulous. And don't hold it like that. Let it flow.
Yeah. Also, I'll just say this real quick is that, take a moment to readjust your posture during your day and take a nice big belly breath for, 3 minutes or 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be it could just be a. Thanks, Lisa.
Oh, love you lots. Thank you so much. See you soon.
See you later. Bye-bye.